or actually CBS, who will take this pressure-filled game?
Well, it's pretty ironic that this firing comes just days before the Giant game. Could it be that the new guy who takes over looks like a genius going up against that Giant defense?
He could, Moorhead, because he's going to actually roll out a more balanced rushing attack. You got guys like Terrence West who actually will thrive with this, along with that rookie that came out.
Kenneth Dixon.
Kenneth Dixon and Buck Allen.
I was about to say, West has definitely got, Dixon breathing down his back. This guy was, touted to be the starting running back this year. He had a great camp, Dixon. Then he gets the injury in preseason. And West has been running well right now. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. The Giants' defense, I have this game being really close. I think it's going to come down to probably a last-second field goal, whether it be Tucker or Brown. I'm going to give it to the home team, though.
You going Giants?
Home.
Well, folks, I respectfully am going opposite. I'm going Ravens. I think the fact that this Giants D is primed to make so many mistakes at home, I'm going with the Ravens and this new-look offense.
Well, if there is a bright side to the Giant defense, they were able to intercept Aaron Rodgers twice last week. They should have come away with a third pick, but it got dropped. Uncharacteristically, the Ravens have been throwing the ball more than they've been passing the ball. That's because they don't have a number one guy to pound the ball to. In this case, I think Flacco could get away with throwing the ball about 40 or 50 times because the Giants' secondary is a cruel joke. So draw your own conclusions from that statement.
And speaking of a cruel joke, the New York Jets visiting the Cardinals in the desert, Monday night ESPN. I'm going with Arizona, obviously, from that statement because that secondary is a cruel joke. They've given up over 65% completion to opposing quarterbacks. Anybody, even a high school Division III team in Texas could do well against this Jets secondary. Yeah, Alabama, Clemson could do better. Sorry.
Well, probably. I didn't know where you were going with that, though. Like even Clemson could do better.
I will say this, though.
Or were you at least giving props?
If Deshaun Watson were to go into the NFL next season, he would definitely do a good job against that Jet defense and every else. But as far as this particular game,
but really, Clemson could actually
they probably could. And and Revis has got the bad hamstring. As per Roto-World, he's probably going to make a go of it. Bad news for the Jets is it looks like Carson Palmer is going to be back and he's going to be starting. So. The Arizona offense is going to pose a whole bunch of problems to this defense. If you try to put extra men in the box to stop David Johnson, who's, current day Marshall Faulk.
He won NFC Offense Player of the Week.
It's just, it's bad. You mentioned the Jets in the first week about the Cincinnati in the game they should have had, and you saw what A.J. Green did to them. And now you go up against Larry Fitzgerald, who's got 5
future
touchdowns,
Hall of Famer.
And he's another type of receiver, a big body to throw to, like A.J. Green. And then you saw last week Sammy Coates just totally burn that secondary. And who do you have in Arizona? John Brown, who, I'm waiting for that big game to come out with him, and this could be the week.
All right. Falcons visiting the Seahawks. Storyline right here. Dan Quinn, coach of this team, the Atlanta Falcons, former defensive coordinator for this team, the Seattle Seahawks. This was the guy who was responsible for 2 years of the Seahawks being a top defense, number one in points per game allowed. They're actually third this year, the Falcons, in points per game, giving up only 13.5. But you're going up against a Falcons offense that's number one in total yards per play, passing yards per play. They're number 7th in rushing yards per game. And on top of that, you have Matt Ryan, who's number one in almost every category, including 20-plus yard plays and 40-plus yard plays.
Yeah, and we didn't mention the running backs, too. When you got Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman, who have combined, the two of them have combined for 570 rushing yards and 6 TDs. And then, they can catch the ball pretty good out of the backfield, too. They got 31 catches between the two of them, 430 yards and 2 TDs. You add that together, that's 1,000 yards from scrimmage, and you're only through week 5. Those are your two running backs. They are, without a doubt, the best duo in the league. And, Seattle could have their hands full if they can just keep rotating those running backs in and out.
If they can really do that and keep the time possession in their favor, especially in a tough environment like the 12th man where you can barely think, let alone call plays in that stadium, if they can do that, they got the Seahawks by the short and curlies. But I'll be honest, they don't call the 12th man for no reason. It broke the sound barrier at least twice in the Guinness Book of World Records.
And this is a real first test for Matt Ryan going up against a really legit defense. You mentioned the offense, but defensively, you can never look past them, especially in the secondary.
And you know what? Russell Wilson, this guy who can play so well even with two bad legs. Yeah. He can play so much better. If they want to win the Falcons, it's their defense that will have to do it, honestly. And there's no way that's going to happen. I'm going with the Seahawks.
I'm going with the Seahawks too, and I think this will probably be a defensive struggle. The Seahawks play much better at home, and never underestimate Matt Ryan. Getting away from the dome, he's had some bad games on the road, and this might be the one where he runs into a pothole.
Let's go to Jerry World. The Packers coming to town, and believe me, this is going to be fun to watch. It's going to be a late, probably America's game showcasing on Fox.
It's a shame they don't put this on prime time, though, because you have the Cowboys that are just flying right now with Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield and Des Bryant over in the slot. And the Packers, who are pretty much holding their own right now. That's all they could do the first quarter of the season is hold their own because they still have their issues with injuries. But nevertheless, this is the marquee game, and this is probably the first big test that Dak Prescott is going to be facing, going up against a really tough Packer D.
And I'll tell you, the matchup to look for is Ezekiel Elliott against the Packers' run D. This is a run defense that's given up only 42.8 yards a game. I'm sorry, you're about to say it.
No, absolutely. I even had that down too. The most they've given up to any running back has been 47 yards. But, take that with a grain of salt because those running backs were T.J. Yeldon, Theo Riddick, Jerick McKinnon, and whoever the Giants want to run against you. They haven't come against an Ezekiel Elliott or the Dallas offensive line. This is going to be that type of game where you have an immovable object. An immovable object meets an unstoppable force. And, I think that's where the game's going to be played, right there on the offensive line, because you really don't want to have Dak Prescott go into Lambeau. It is a tough spot to play, and you're going to have a rookie quarterback that,
in Lambeau.
Yeah, it's in Lambeau. That, going to Lambeau, it's going to be a tough spot.
It's going to be
tough. Well, it's always Jerry's world. Jerry. But it's a tough spot for a rookie to play in. And even though Prescott hasn't thrown a pick this year, you could possibly see one coming this weekend. So to take pressure off Prescott, they're going to need Elliott to have another 100-yard game, which is a tall order against this Packer defense.
And so I'm going with the Packers to win.
I'm never going to go against my Cowboys, so I got the Cowboys winning, but I'm going to have a one-point game. I'm going to have 24-23, and let's just hope Elliott has a big game for me in fantasy as well.
I will raise that to 27-24 Packers. Field goal. Okay, now Bengals, Patriots. Remember a few years ago after the Patriots got their butts handed to them on Monday night against Kansas City 41-14? And what was Bill Belichick saying? On to Cincinnati. It's on to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So they're on to Cincinnati this week. And guess who's coming back home for the first time since last year? Tom Brady.
Yep. Oh, it's a homecoming, all right. It's just you don't want to be the Bengals right now. I mean, you just came out of Dallas and you had a rookie quarterback just shred you, and now you're coming into New England with a 4-time Super Bowl champ, 3-time MVP in the Super Bowl, 2-time league MVP. It's gonna be shoo-in for a Hall of Famer. This is a real tough spot for Cincinnati, and and then on top of it, they don't have their tight end still. Tyler Eifert is still not in the lineup. This is just a really bad spot for the Bengals.
How bad are the Bengals going to get their butts kicked by New England?
I got this as the word. Well, it's a toss-up between this and, I'm sure we're going to get to the Pittsburgh game. Pittsburgh and the Dolphins as what's going to be the blowout of the week. But, it's. I mean, I don't know. I put down Patriots 38-16. I mean, I can't see the Bengals really do much. You know what? AJ Green will have a good game for you in fantasy because they're going to be catching up in the fourth quarter. But this is when Brady's going to be wearing his baseball cap on the sideline. But Green will get you 10 catches over 100 yards and a touchdown.
That's a very charitable score right there. Believe me, I think it's going to be a lot worse. I'm going like 52 points right there.
It could get like that, yeah.
And believe me, the Bengals, Brandon LaFell is really going to be the only offense in that game, and I have him in my fantasy league. He had 2 touchdowns for me last week. I love it. Now, Eagles, Redskins, NFC East showdown. Remember last year when the Eagles clinched the when the Redskins clinched the NFC East? They beat the Eagles to do that. This time,
yeah, and it was Kirk Cousins said that I made that infamous "How You Like Me Now" quote to NFL Films. But this time, the things have changed a little bit because after getting his first loss as a pro, Carson Wentz is going to have a really tough test this time because it's a division rival, a hated division rival at that, and a division rival that looks like they're peaking at the right time. I mean, granted, they're not really scoring a lot of points or lighting up the scoreboard at will the way they want to, but still, they're able to take advantage of the really soft part of the schedule and give Cousins a little bit more margin for error. But now, going up against an Eagle defense that's just really been soaring before the Detroit game, this time it's a matter of which quarterback is going to be making the big play. Is it going to be the rookie Wentz, or is it going to be a guy like Cousins who seems to me still has a chip on his shoulder and a lot to prove?
Cousins, and the reason why I'm picking the Redskins to win, if you notice who's going to be missing on the O-line for the Eagles, Lane Johnson. He is getting his 10-game suspension started. That's going to be that's going to hurt the continuity of what Wentz is doing with that O-line. That means Ryan Kerrigan's going to get a few sacks in Wentz's face, cause some turnovers. I'm going with the Redskins.
I still don't know if the Redskins are for real. I mean, we just mentioned now that the Redskins season was saved by the Giants. I mean, the Giants, never underestimate the Giants simultaneously ruining their season and saving your season. So you go back a few weeks ago and that Giant game where they should have buried Washington, that got them their first win. And then we just mentioned before about the game in Baltimore, and Baltimore probably should have won that game. I don't know if I'm totally sold yet on Cousins, but the Philadelphia defense you mentioned, it's been a really good unit this year as a whole. They have 7 takeaways. Matt Jones at running back, he's only rushed for more than 65 yards once this year, and it was against the Cleveland Browns. And the Philadelphia Eagles have only given up 65 yards to a running back once. So I got it as a low-scoring game, but I'm going to go with Philadelphia on this one. And maybe it's because I just have a heart for Carson Wentz. I like these 2 rookie quarterbacks. And I know it's tough for me to say as a Dallas fan. I like Carson Wentz also, but he's another guy on my fantasy team. Yeah, he's another guy on my fantasy team, and he helped me win when Drew Brees was on a bye. So I think it's going to be fun to watch these 2 kids mature in the NFC East.
It's going to be it's going to be a down and dirty game. Deshaun Jackson, man, whoever's going to be covering him, man, whether it's Carroll, whoever, they better watch out. He's going to be tough. Chiefs, Raiders, AFC, these guys been together since the AFL days and the NFL. That's like 57 seasons combined right there. That's a lot of time to get to know each other in the worst and best ways. Mostly worse.
Things have changed quite drastically for these 2 teams, whereas the Raiders are at the top of the AFC West. The Chiefs are just trying to break out of 500 right now.
I'll tell you, this game right here is going to come down to, I think, the Chiefs secondary, Marcus Peters going up against Michael Crabtree. I think that's really the matchup to look forward to because Crabtree's been really the big weapon so far for the Raiders this year. Amari Cooper,
from a touchdown standpoint, Cooper and Crabtree, together have 55 catches. So, that's becoming a really good duo there. And I like what they're doing with David Carr. But, how about the Oakland Raiders just rotating 3 running backs? And, they all have about 170 yards, but they're getting it done. Now Murray's sidelined with the turf toe, but you got Jalen Rashad and DeAndre Washington. You got two rookie running backs that they're getting it done both, and it is really a 50-50 split there. It's going to be a fun game to watch. I mean, I think this, outside of the Dallas game, this is a game that I'm really looking forward to watching in the black hole there.
You're going with the Raiders, right?
I am going with the Raiders because they are the home team, and that's a tough place to play. And the Chiefs, I think, are also specific to Arrowhead. They are a much better team at home than they are on the road.
Guess who I'm picking?
Kansas
City.
Yeah, you're going to go opposite me.
You know why? Because let's not forget, the Chiefs are coming off a bye. Andy Reid's the coach, and if you look at his lifetime record in 17 years with the Chiefs and the Eagles, he's 15-2. That's an 882 winning percentage with the bye. Right there.
Good. There you go.
That's my reasoning. A battle for the AFC South. Colts, Texans, 2 hated rivals. This is going to be fun to watch and sort of like, oh, God, at the same time. I know, sorry if I invoked the Lord's name right now.
Well, let me tell you,
that was not nice.
That AFC South has become about as bland a division as you could possibly see. Right now, the Texans are up by a game over 2 out of the remaining 3 teams. Somewhere down the line, somebody's going to have to take control of this division. I always thought the Colts were the better team in the division because they have the better quarterback. And in this game, they still have the better quarterback. It's Andrew Luck. The Texans have the big money free agent, Brock Osweiler, who's not been terrible, but has not necessarily put up the big numbers to
Not
lead
terrible.
the Texans. Not terrible, I'm saying.
I'm sorry. I think you're being very nice to him. He's had 7 interceptions. There's 2 other players who have it worse than him.
Yeah.
They're paying him $37 million guaranteed bucks for the next 2 years.
Yet somehow the Texans have still been able to keep that lead in the division because their defense has been taking control in games. But in this case, you've got 2 teams that are rather weak defensively. Well, in this case, the Texans are better defensively, whereas the Colts just cannot seem to try and make a big stop, probably because they can't make a big rush on their quarterback. This is the time where Andrew Luck really has to grab the game by the throat.
Hey, you know what? Me and him,
I think he is going to grab it by the throat. You know, I mean, they're going. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
you,
no,
but
no, not at all.
they're going into Houston, which is a de facto home game for the Colts. I mean, because they are a dome team. They're going into another dome. You know, the Houston Texans have fed Lamar Miller a workload that would make a mule puke. I mean, the amount of touches this guy gets per game, and he still has yet to get into the end zone. I mean, that offensive line has, and he has a 3.7 yard per carriage. You know, you contrast that to Frank Gore. Does this guy ever get old, Frank Gore? I mean, he's 33 years old. Eventually, the wheels are going to fall off this thing. But he might as well ride him as long as he's on pace for another 1,000-yard season. It'd be his 9th in his career. You know, I think the Indianapolis Colts, after that London disaster, you know, losing to Jacksonville, but I like what they did coming back home. They took care of business. And again, they go into a Houston team that doesn't really overly impress me that much. I don't think Brock Osweiler is.
I like Will Fuller, though. I have to admit,
I love Will Fuller.
I think he's probably one of the best things to come out of Houston. Other than that, I'm not sold on the rest of the team. I'm going with the Colts, Andrew Luck, and that 5th scoring offense.
I got the Colts winning, and
Sorry.
it's going to come down to Adam Vinatieri, who's the best kicker in the league right now.
49ers visiting the Bills. Kaepernick's season debut after almost a year being on the bench. I'm going with, the Buffalo Bills. And the reason why, since the time they fired Greg Roman, their rushing offense has gone from a putrid 70 yards per game on the ground to almost 175.
Yeah, they're Shady McCoy's back, and he's running angry, and this defense is playing at the top of their game right now.
And Tyrod Taylor.
Tyrod Taylor, you know, he gets that. You know, he'll chuck that ball deep. He might miss you half the time, but he will hit. You know, he'll have a big play. The Bills have the NFL sack leader in Lorenzo Alexander, and they have the tackles leader in Zach Brown. And you know, Rex Ryan is he saved his job with that. Yeah. We're going to go back to that Week 3 big win against Arizona at home, and he's really turned the corner. And I think San Francisco's just going into a buzzsaw. Yeah.
And he's got Jerry Garcia's ghost on his sideline.
I'm a little curious to see what the Bills' defense can do against a scrambling quarterback like Kaepernick, though. I mean, granted, he had a whole bunch of injuries that sidetracked him the first quarter of the season, but he's 100% now. And political differences aside, right now, he's the guy that should be leading the offense for the 49ers because, just as I said before, Blaine Gabbert is not an NFL quarterback. He's just some guy in a uniform masquerading as one.
You're not going to miss him at all?
No.
Come on. You don't have that soft spot?
No.
I know. Well, I could see from there he's going Bills too. Rams with Case Keenum going up against the Detroit Lions. Let me put it this way. I'm going Lions, even with Justin Forsett now signed to the backfield to back up Theo Riddick. It's still mostly going to be Theo Riddick and a big dose of
Dwayne Russian.
Yeah.
Or is his accent? Or I don't know. I don't know.
Golden Tate.
But Golden Tate. Yeah. I think the big stat this game is looking. Todd Gurley comes into this game averaging 2.7 yards per carry. This was one of the best rookies in the league last year. He was the offensive rookie player of the year. And, you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, you got Case Keenum at quarterback. I'm always going to go with the veteran quarterback at home in the Dome. I'm going to go with Matt Stafford, who's on pace this year, actually. He's quietly on pace for 4,400 yards this year, 32 touchdowns and 20 picks. So I'm going to go with the Lions also.
The best travel fans in all of football, Steeler Nation, taking a nice vacation to South Florida to see them beat the Dolphins.
This time they definitely will not have any problem selling out Hard Rock Stadium because there are going to be a whole bunch of Steeler fans making their way down to the now 60,000 seat Hard Rock Stadium as opposed to the 70,000 seat one before the reconstruction.
You know how much money they spent? $500 million in renovations in the stadium alone.
And that was for the sole purpose of bringing a Super Bowl back to South Florida down the road.
And to make sure that there are not too many rain delays in these games. That's why they have
specifically from thunderstorms.
So, there's going to be a lot of thunder going on in this game, but it's going to be from Le'Veon Bell. The Miami Dolphins dead last in the league, averaging 150 yards rushing yards against. They're going against one of the best running backs in football. He is so patient. It's actually. I love to watch him run because he lines up about 8 yards behind Ben Roethlisberger. He lets the play develop. Yeah. I think he's going to have a big game. And in those 4 wins that Pittsburgh has, they've outscored their opponents 34-15 in each of those games. This is going to be a terrible, terrible loss for the Dolphins.
Terrible doesn't begin to cover it.
Begin to cover it.
This is going to be tragic to watch this team. That's the only thing I could say is Steeler fans, enjoy the beach, enjoy the surroundings, go to South Beach, have a great time, and go to North Miami Beach. There's a good restaurant called Chef Rolf's Tunas. Yeah. Very good seafood.
The one bright spot on the Dolphins this year, Jarvis Landry, who's become one of the best possession receivers in football. Yeah. There are 34 catches. He'll be good for your fantasy team as the Dolphins try to catch up.
Other than that, you're going to see Tannehill on his back more times than I care to even think about. Now, the Panthers taking on the Saints in, of course, New Orleans. I love it.
And the only saving grace for the Panthers, who have gotten off to a dreadful start, is that Cameron Newton is going to be coming back from his 1-week hiatus from that concussion. Other than that, I couldn't even begin to tell you what's going to be happening over here. The Saints play zero defense whatsoever. The Panthers have been a colossal disappointment on each side of the ball.
Yeah, I'm going with Saints, considering the way the Panthers been playing lately, the absent running game. Yes, Cameron Artis-Payne got a few.
They do get. I think they get Stewart back this week. At least as per Roto. Well, I mean, again, I don't think that's. I think this game is going to be one in the air anyway. The stat I have from this game: the 2 home games this year that the Saints have played, teams have combined for 146 points scored. So that's an average of 73 per game. Go with the over.
And now the last 2 games to talk about. Jaguars-Bears and Titans-Browns, folks. Which game?
We saved the worst for last.
Exactly.
Actually, I'm not going to say that because I do have to give props to my one of my favorite running backs in DeMarco Murray in Tennessee, but we'll get to that after, I guess, the Jacksonville game.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of Jacksonville, I'll be honest, Chicago is going to win that game. Jordan Howard is going to have a monster day against that Jags defense. That to me, so the Bears are going to have a very good times.
Yeah,
the Bears.
Yeah. We mentioned Jacksonville and Indianapolis playing over in London. That might be the only place that Jacksonville can win outside of Jacksonville since 2014. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 1-16 on the road. It is terrible, and they're going into Soldier Field, like you said. Howard's been great the last 2 weeks. Hoyer hasn't thrown a pick. This Bears team is better than its 1-4 record. I got the Bears winning this game too.
Yeah, big time. How about you?
This is me caring.
Okay,
seriously. Can you get any worse than Jacksonville versus Chicago? Actually, you can. It's Cleveland versus Tennessee.
Cleveland versus Tennessee.
By the way, what do the cities of Cleveland and Chicago have in common?
Good baseball teams.
Exactly.
Terrible football teams. I just hit the nail right in the head.
So who's going to get the more television ratings, the baseball teams or the football teams?
Speaking of which, Indians play Game 1 in about 4 minutes against the Blue Jays at home, and tomorrow night the Cubs host the Dodgers. So again, I think we answered our own.
Yeah, well,
and Sunday the Browns are going to be going up against the Titans team that's just plain mediocre.
Oh my God!
I'm going to actually challenge you just for 1 second there, only because the Titans are 2-3, but the 3 losses have come against the Vikings, the Raiders, and the Texans. So those teams, we just mentioned how good the Vikings are. Mentioned the Raiders at 4-1. Those 3 teams have a combined record of 12-3. So they're not really losing to slouches. They get a Cleveland team that's just downright awful. Cleveland is going to be playing for Deshaun Watson probably next year. Although had they not traded away the second overall pick, they might have had Carson Wentz this year.
And they could have won 3 games this year. They blew the Ravens game. They blew the game against Miami. And, if you think about it, I think it was week 4 when they were against Washington. They blew 3 games they could have won.
Right.
That's what kills me.
Actually, just on a final note in this game, do you remember last year when everybody said DeMarco Murray sees his career was done? after Chip Kelly, tried to insert the proverbial round peg into a square hole, Murray had 4.8 yards per carry in his tenure in Dallas. Went down to 3.6 under Kelly this year, 5 yards a carry, and he has 73% of all the handoffs in the Tennessee backfield.
Wow.
He is back, and he's back with a vengeance. He's number 2 in the league in rushing, and I expect a big game out of him.
And they're going to win because you're going up against a team that has more quarterbacks than I care to think, especially 5 quarterbacks in 5 weeks. It's like the old question: how many quarterbacks does it take to fix a light bulb in Cleveland? Yeah. The world may never know.
One of my friends asked me in fantasy football, he has Terrell Pryor, and he goes, if I have Terrell Pryor at wide receiver and he comes in at quarterback, do I get his points? I'm like, yeah, you do. You get all his offensive points. Lucky you, because you basically are going to start 2 quarterbacks in fantasy.
Here's the crazy thing. Since the beginning of 2014, Jamie, the Titans have lost 16 of their 18 home games.
That's an absolute embarrassment right there.
And that's week 6, and of course we got Clemson Nation. We got a member of Clemson Nation, and you guys got the Wolfpack coming to visit you in Death Valley.
Yeah, we're going to take care of business there in Death Valley. That's a game that really doesn't. The game on the schedule, the 2 games that I was fearful of was the game in Louisville and the game in Florida State and going into Tallahassee. But I think Clemson will take care of business there.
And the top 2 games this week, you got the Buckeyes visiting the Badgers in Madison. That's going to be huge. Corey Clement, the team that averaged 3.8 yards a game against the Buckeyes team with J.T. Barrett. That's going to be tough. And then the Crimson Tide visiting the Volunteers, 3:30 on CBS. You got to go with the Rolling Tide.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't say that word because I said we don't have a 7-second delay, and I can't say a curse word, so I'm not going to say
Oh,
I'm still hurting from last year's championship game.
I know.
Things might change this time. You never know.
You know what? It's going to be crazy. It's going to be fun. Sean, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Harry.
Jamie.
Thank you, as always, for having me.
Jamie,
great working with you,
Great working with you, too.
And can't wait to do next week with you. Can't wait to have you on a future show, my man.
Absolutely.
You should come back. You were an amazing guest. And for all the hardworking people at CTV, for Mr. Kenneth Graham, for Sean Dennis, for Mr. Jamie the Sportsman Hickson, I'm Eric Rosen. We'll see you here in a week on the Blitz on CTV. Good night and peace, Staten Island.